fall 2020 contracts. This is the second video that's going to be posted. It's a continuation of the first video, which I just posted a few moments ago. And in the first video, I made some general observations, and then I talked some about the material in the first chapter in the book. This video is going to be addressing just a few points in the second chapter, which is the chapter on agreement. In that chapter, if you look at the chapter, the book is great, by the way. So if you look at the material in the book, in chapter 2, and then the posting I made, we understand that an agreement to satisfy the required element of a contract calling for an agreement is when we have a valid offer that's been effectively accepted. There are two problems or questions at the end of chapter 2 that I thought would be useful for me to discuss with you in the hope that it might clarify and deepen your understanding of what material is in chapter 2, or what the material is in chapter 2, and my posting of material about chapter 2. So what you may want to do at this point is pause the video and make sure you have your book for the course, and we're going to be looking at question 11-1 on page 32, and we're going to say a few things about, if I can find it here, there it is, question 11-4 on page 33. So let me get to question 11-1, and I hope by now you paused the video and you have it in front of you. And this question, we have two characters, Ball and Sullivan. And Ball writes a letter to Sullivan, and it turns out Sullivan owns 40 acres of land. And in his letter to Sullivan, Ball is asking Sullivan, how much are you asking for this particular parcel of land? And Sullivan responds, and now I'm quoting what he says. Sullivan says, I will not take less than $60,000 for the 40-acre tract as specified. So we've got Ball writing Sullivan saying, what are you asking for that piece of land? You've got Sullivan writing back saying, I won't take less than 60 grand. Now what happens is Ball immediately sends Sullivan a telegram, quoting, I accept your offer for $60,000 for the 40-acre tract as specified, close quote. And we're asked to discuss whether Ball, the guy who asked how much Sullivan was asking for the land, whether Ball can hold Sullivan to a contract for the sale of the land. And what we see when we look at this cases and looking at it now, we're seeing that these two guys, Ball and Sullivan, are involved in negotiations. And the question becomes, when Sullivan writes to Ball, I will not take less than $60,000 for the 40-acre tract as specified, is that an offer? Or better said, perhaps, is it a valid offer? And if it is a valid offer, clearly Ball's response that I accept is going to be an effective acceptance. So let's consider whether that letter by Sullivan, I will not take less than 60 grand, whether that's a valid offer. If you look at the elements of a valid offer, one of them is, according to a reasonable person, the offer sets forth a sincere or genuine intent to be bound by its terms. And what I'm going to say to you is that the letter that Sullivan writes, I will not take less than 60 grand, does not reflect a serious intent to be bound to the terms of anything. It's simply a matter of inviting Ball to respond with some kind of an offer, or if you will, an invitation to offer, extend an offer. And what he's telling him is, if you do that, don't offer me less than 60 grand. And so when we look at it further, since there's no valid offer, Ball's response doesn't constitute an acceptance. And really what that response could constitute is an offer to buy the land for 60 grand, which then gives Sullivan the option to accept it or not. And consider one thing when you're thinking this through. When Sullivan states, I will not take less than 60 grand for the 40-acre tract as specified, he, it seems to me, if we look at this reasonably, could be involved in negotiations with other people. He could be contemplating negotiations with other people. He may be hopeful that he's going to get involved for his benefit in a bidding war, being engaged in by various bidders. And if I could just offer you this thought, right now in western New York, in many areas, houses are in high demand, and the supply is not matching the demand. Put differently, if you're selling a house, it may well be that you're going to be enjoying a bidding war among a couple of buyers. I just learned of an instance the other day where a guy and his wife listed a house for $190,000 and sold it for $200,000 48 hours later after a couple of people got involved in a bidding war. So in that situation, if you were selling your house today in western New York, you might very well say to the realtor, you know, our listing price is going to be, I'm just making up a number, $230,000, and we're not going to accept anything less than $230,000. And so someone is now looking at the house and asked the realtor, what is this going for? And the realtor might say, well, listen, it's going for whatever number I mentioned, $225,000. And I can tell you that that the seller isn't going to accept anything less. That statement does not constitute an offer. It's simply inviting an offer, and it's inviting an offer with the understanding that we're not even going to consider your offer if it's below the 225. So in any event, that's my take on problem 11-1, and I'm going to turn to problem 11-4 on page 33. And in my posting, I walked through this problem. I just want to do it with you again in this video. What can happen sometimes is this. You've got a valid offer out there, and the party who's extended the offeror, after the offer has been extended, wants to revoke it. Wants to, if you will, take it off the table. Why might he want to take it off the table, or why might she want to take it off the table? Because there could be another buyer out there who has indicated they would pay more. But in any event, you got the offeror, as we call that party, wanting to revoke the offer, terminate it. And the offeree, the party to whom the offer is made, has received the offer and thinks, you know what, this is pretty cool, I'm going to accept it. So now the offeree takes steps to accept the offer at the same time that the offerer is taking steps to revoke the offer. And in those situations, how do we figure out, if you will, whether we end up with an agreement or whether we have an offer that's been effectively revoked? And while while maybe the facts of this case are a little bit dated because they're using mail, we can follow it through. So the offeror is Dennis, and he extends the offer by mailing a letter to Tanya, and on Saturday, 2 days after he mailed the offer, he decides he's going to revoke it, so he sends a fax transmission to Tanya's office. Well, Tanya's not in her office on Saturday and doesn't see the fax until she arrives in her office on Monday. And what happens is, before she gets to the office on Monday, she has dropped into a mailbox. Back then they had them. And has a properly addressed and stamped envelope to Dennis accepting his offer. And so now what we have is Dennis claiming the offer was revoked, and we've got Tanya claiming the offer had been effectively accepted. So now we go to our rules, and the rules for effective revocation is an offer is not effectively revoked until the offeree learns of the revocation. Well, Tanya did not learn of the revocation until after she mailed her letter of acceptance. The next rule is, when is acceptance effective? And acceptance is effective when it's transmitted, provided the means of transmission are reasonable, and provided that there's no other manner of acceptance specified in the offer. In this case, Dennis didn't specify any means of acceptance, so the question is, was it reasonable for Tanya to respond to the offer, which was mailed to her by mailing acceptance? And the answer is yes, it was reasonable. We sometimes call that the mailbox rule. And then we see that the acceptance was effective when she dropped it in the mailbox, because that's when it was transmitted. That's when it was made. So in this case, as I also said in the work through in the posted material, Tanya will prevail because of the fact that her acceptance was effective before the offeror's revocation would have been effective. And we're not going to do it in this video, but we could jazz this up by using email or voicemail messages as opposed to snail mail, but the same principles would apply.